I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, thoughts build up until...
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. I'm sorry if it sounds insensitive to say this, but honestly, the first thing I thought after hearing about the Jay Slater case the first time, my very first thought was an Afrikaans aphorism, van lekker lach kom lekker huil. It literally means from lots of laughing comes lots of crying. Literally, from hearty laughter comes hearty crying. That seemed a little overly simplistic at the time, except now, after more than 30 days, we've had more and more reinforcement that there really was a lot of laughing. There really was a lot of fun. There really was a lot of excess. And so I think if on the one hand we underestimated the terrain, just how treacherous and rugged the terrain was, I think on the other hand we may have also underestimated the sheer amount of levity that immediately preceded the tragedy. Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, I do want to remind the British listeners, the British viewers, the British readers of my 5 books, a trilogy and a duology on the Madeleine McCann case. If you're interested if you've met me for the first time, if you found my analysis interesting, you might want to take it further and read some of my Madeleine McCann books. If not, go and have a look at the YouTube playlist on Madeleine McCann. You might find it quite interesting. I did a whole long series debunking the Netflix docu-series. Then I've also written a book on Nora Corrin, who was found after a 10-day search in the Malaysian jungle, barely 1.6 miles from her bungalow. There's also a big thing, is this an accident or foul play? And then there are also 2 trilogies dealing with the murder of Meredith Kercher in Perugia. By the way, I'll be heading to Perugia later this year to walk through and more deeply investigate the fabric of that narrative. And I'll be sharing that with you later this year. So obviously if you read, you update yourselves on that case through those books, you're going to get a much deeper experience sharing it with me. Then I've also covered in some depth on YouTube the trial and conviction and the evidence against one of Britain's worst female serial killers, Lucy Letby, as well as more than half a dozen women who have disappeared in Britain's rivers, including Nicola Bulley. Incidentally, I didn't think that case involved foul play either. If you find this analysis worthwhile, and certainly this is the last of 12 clues that we all missed, please let me know in the comments. You can also like and share. You can also hit the thanks button. If you haven't hit the thanks button once in all of these many videos, maybe this is your last chance.
This is your last chance.
Right, and so without further ado, let's get started with this analysis. Now, just in the last 48 hours, we've had confirmation that Jay and the Airbnb dudes were laughing and joking during Jay's final hours, during that final drive to Muscat. Now, if only during this drive Jay had taken note of where they were going, if he was just calm and kind of sensible and made some sort of sober assessment of where he was, everything could have been avoided. He would have realized, wow, we're driving quite far away from our hotel. But instead he was kind of distracted. And because they were having so much fun, because he wasn't sober, he had no idea where he was when he sort of left the Airbnb the next morning. Now, if we go backwards along the timeline, it's not just a single night of partying. It's 3 nights back to back, and likely also the days in between too, drinking at the pool. Now, NRG raves on Instagram say, for example, come join us for 3 days of madness featuring day and night raves, boat parties, coffee shop takeovers, etc., etc. Now, we also know from eyewitnesses at this rave that Jay wasn't the average partygoer. He was attracting attention because he was stumbling around. Now, if he was falling on a level dance floor, why not on steep, uneven, treacherous terrain? People actually saw him getting up off the ground on a level dance floor? Why not when he was kind of in the wilderness? Sleep deprived, dehydrated, perhaps also still somewhat intoxicated. And so after 3 nights of drinking and revelry, Jay still wasn't done. We told, Brad said so, and so did Lucy, that Jay just wasn't ready to call it a night, that he wanted to carry on partying, and that's exactly what he did. That is why he went with his new pals, and they went from the Papagayo nightclub to have drinks in a bar that was still open in Santiago del Teide. They returned at 06:40, around about there, barely half an hour before sunrise. By most standards, I mean, think about it yourself. When last did you return from a night out after 6 a.m., let alone 3 nights out in a row, right? And on the 3rd night, you come back at 6 a.m. That is quite late just on its own. That's quite late. How many times have you come home from a night out at 6 a.m.? Well, this was closer to 7 a.m. There are also so many current and almost current intertextual examples of the exact same van lekker lag kom lekker huil scenarios, from having a great laugh, a rip-roaring time, to absolute tragedy and catastrophe immediately afterwards. There's Riley Strain in Tennessee, drinking out late at night, walks by himself, gets lost, disappears. His toxicology found that he was more than 3 times over the legal alcohol limit. That shouldn't have been a surprise, because the CCTV clearly showed him stumbling around and falling. There's also Kylie Rodney. Big party, revelry, then drives by herself in the dark, then catastrophe. There's also Jack O'Sullivan, who's been missing since March 2nd in Bristol. That's almost 4 full months. Same thing. Big party, drinking, is by himself alone in the dark, catastrophe. Now, you can say what you like. In all of these cases, there was a heck of a lot of laughing and drinking immediately preceding all of these cases. I think you can at least agree on that aspect. How many cases in just plain old ordinary true crime involve a general scenario of lekker lag, of good times, followed by lekker huil, tragedy? Think about Casey Anthony. Think about Amanda Knox and Meredith Kercher, that murder immediately following a big Halloween party. Funny, do you ever see what outfit Amanda Knox wore that Halloween? Because you see Meredith's Halloween outfit, do you ever see Amanda's? And you do see Amanda the next day, kind of not quite lekker huil, but basically standing outside the villa looking quite sober. Scott Peterson was partying with Amber Frey shortly before Lacey disappeared. What about Chris Watts' 5 weeks of rip-rollicking fun on the Nicole Kessinger roller coaster? In the JonBenet Ramsey case, there is literally a dinner party right before JonBenet's death, and many additional parties on the days before, including Patsy's big 40th birthday bash and John's business, celebrating $1 billion in turnover just 4 days before Christmas. And what about the Madeleine McCann case? I'm scratching my head. I'm trying to remember, was there any drinking and enjoying themselves stuff going on around the time poor little Madeleine vanished? Oh, do you still think there's no connection here?
You're braver than I thought.
Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.